I am going to be full of forgiveness, grace, and I'm not going to be judgmental, right? So if something starts to get talked about that's like, that was like, you spent money on that, like, nope, I'm going to forgive. That's in the past, right?
Yeah.
What we're doing here is we're not having the conversation to be super overly critical of the past. We're having the conversation about how to refine the month ahead. To undo some of this stuff and to learn it and to master it. And it's really, really tough. So
We gotta figure out how to talk about it.
We are going to ask a really tough question, and then we're going to divide everybody kind of into two. So the question is this: is it hard for you to talk about money with your spouse, your partner, your family, the people that are really close to you? Is it hard to talk about money with them? And the reality is that for most of us, that is true. So I want to differentiate the group here. If talking about money is either very, very easy for you to do with your loved ones, or if you've kind of found this magical relationship where you and your other person never have to discuss finances and it works, then you guys have the week off. You guys can turn off the episode. You don't have to listen anymore. But for those of you that find that it is wildly important and to discuss finances with your partner, and sometimes it gets tough, sometimes there's contention, sometimes there's frustration, we're going to discuss it and hopefully give you guys some tools, some tips, to
make that conversation a little easier. To
make it easier. But the most important thing here is we're not going to give you some pretend magical solution that will make this easy. The drawing in our weekly email that we sent out on this topic is that it starts with making the decision to talk about money, and then it comes to try it again. And then you talk about it again, and then you're going to try. So it's an evolution. It's an ongoing process that will take the rest of your relationship to be good at. And you have to understand that there are going to be times where you have to pause, you have to take a time out. You're going to have disagreements. There's no like magic dust.
It's just like anything else. You got to practice.
You have to practice. And hopefully it gets to the point where 99% of the time it gets easy. But I don't know of a single person. We work with a lot of clients, and I don't know of a single couple, a single family that never has a disagreement or some sort of frustration in talking about this with the people that they love. We boiled it down to really, like, if you are in a position, if you are in a relationship, or if you are around loved ones where you do think it is important to discuss finances with them, you have one of two options, right? Option one is in the relationship and do it all by yourself.
Yep.
Option two is to keep trying again and again and again to get better and better at this, right?
Or you want to talk about kind of the reasons why it's important to start these conversations with your spouse, or
there's a new front inside of like financial planning. So it was even part of my like CFP curriculum. And the newer, I don't know if it's a new term, but it's definitely a new focus, and it's getting a lot of attention and research, and that is financial infidelity. So I just want to cover,
explain that a little bit.
Yeah, a couple things. So financial infidelity, by definition, is simply it's paragraphs and chapters long, but in the simplest form, it's just lying about your finances. It's being dishonest or untruthful about your finances. So what are some examples of this? The most common one out there is hiding purchases, and not necessarily hiding the entire purchase, but it's also about being dishonest in the cost. So I have been guilty of this time and time again. And
if you buy something that's
it's not even
$199, you're like, yeah, I spent about $100.
Right. It's not even necessarily with a spouse or with family. I will also even do this sometimes with friends, because there's like the number one reason. So we'll just go ahead and throw this out there. The number one cause of financial infidelity is shame or guilt. Right. So, and we see this on both sides. We see this from people that don't have the money that they're spending. They shouldn't spend it because they don't have the money. So they feel shame about spending money that they don't have.
Yep.
There's also, I know people that make more than enough, that are wildly successful and doing everything in their finances right, but they will still sometimes lie about the money they spend because there's shame or guilt with the fact that they have so much and they're able to spend so much with people that around them that they know aren't in the same.
Right.
You know,
that's 100% true.
So, that's the number one kind of, thing is hiding purchases. But, I've seen examples of people receiving money and not wanting to let their spouse or loved ones know that they did. This can come in the way, like
getting a bonus check,
a surprise bonus. They receive money on like maybe birthdays. So another like kind of category is what we call stashing bills, like stashing cash. So if somebody, that is like a family member gives me, $500, I don't want to tell that person. I don't want to tell my loved one because I want to go spend it. It's my money, right? So I'm going to hide, and cash is easy to hide. So hiding money, and not just being honest and saying, hey, I got this money. It's extra income and I plan on spending it. I've seen it go as far as spouses having secret accounts. Hey, I want all of this talked about in the financial plan, but this account is more just fun money for me. I keep it over here. I've seen things, another kind of, it can be summed up. I sum it up as like a tit for tat kind of thing. So, my spouse went out and spent, $700 on a new gun. So I'm going to go spend $700 on whatever I want, and I don't have to tell him or her. So, and then that just kind of snowballs from there. Well, I found out that you spent this much, so I'm going to go spend this much without telling you. And it kind of just keeps going and going and going.
Yep, that's never a good thing.
Yeah. So financial infidelity, just being dishonest in any shape, way, or form through omission or lying outright. There was a Forbes survey recently done. In that survey, 38% of the respondents admitted to committing financial infidelity. And this was kind of surprising to me. 54% said that financial infidelity was equally as bad as actual infidelity, cheating on a spouse. Which, and again, that just, like, if you sum that up, about half the people out there that are listening to this, like, you might be listening and be like, yeah, I've definitely not told my spouse that I got $500 given to me that one time, or my family member, whatever the case may be, whoever you're with, whoever's important to you. I've definitely not told them about this. Just understand that about half the people out there, you're making an assumption that it's not that bad, but the other half, so probably if you think that that's not that bad of a thing,
the other half
the likelihood of your spouse thinking that statistically your spouse is the other half, right? So out of two of you, one of you think it's not that bad. The other one thinks that's almost as bad as you just going out and cheating on me, right? So the number, again, I already alluded to this, the most common act of financial infidelity in that survey was they lied about purchases. They lied about the amounts that they spent on things. We said this, why is it so hard to talk about shame and guilt? Hands down. And that can be from not having enough or having too much. It weighs on everybody. So this is real stuff. And we know that, divorce is incredibly high in our country. And what were you saying, the three reasons?
The top three reasons for divorce was incompatibility, infidelity, and finances.
Okay. So if you want to stack the odds in your favor and move the needle that you'll have the person in your life that you love, and you'll have them, for as long as possible.
Let's figure out a way.
This is something that we can eliminate one of the three if we learn how to do this well.
Let's figure out a way to talk about it.
Right. And again, the kind of fun part about this episode is we don't really have a magical answer. We have tips. We have things that we have seen that works. So we're going to try to talk a little bit about that. I want to start with, in part of our curriculum. So if you're in our financial planning curriculum, you have the app. In November and December, we focus a lot on insurance and estate planning. Estate planning could be as simple as having a will. It could be as much as having an actual estate and trust and all kinds of things that you have to work through. We choose November and December to have those conversations because we know that people are probably going to be around family members in those holiday times. If I go and change everything about the will, the trust, if I change anything that could have implications, like I have a daughter, if I change something that could have an effect on maybe my mother or my brother taking care of being the trustee, my daughter as a beneficiary, like there's a family impact.
There's a conversation that needs to be had because there's no point in you having all this information in your head because the whole thing is something happened to you.
Right.
So your family needs to know, or the people that are involved in that estate need to know.
Anything that was in your brain and that stayed in your brain is now gone. And so we can rely on the paper. People can be surprised. I've seen circumstances where I've called someone and said, "Hey, you're the trustee of this trust."
They had no idea.
And they're like, "What?"
Yeah.
I live over here. I'm doing this thing with my life, and now I have to stop what I'm doing. I had no idea. So having these conversations at the family level, I wrote an article that was in a magazine, and it discusses a lot about how to have these conversations with your children. One of the things that I have driven time and time again, I want my daughter to understand, most importantly, that it is not weird to talk about finances. It's not a shameful secret. It is a part of our life, and we need, just like anything else, we need to know that it is okay to talk about this, even if you're in a bad situation. A lot of times secrets in our finances can perpetuate secrets in our lives. So if I'm in a lot of debt because I have an addiction to gambling, and, I'm hiding my financial decisions from my family on the gambling, but I'm also hiding that I just need help in general. Right. So if we have a regular planned time that we're going to talk about finances, sometimes it becomes easier to tell talk about the skeletons in our closet. And we can create that open dialogue.
But I think right now is this time, we need to create that open dialogue because like the baby boomers, the Gen X's, at least in my family growing up, we didn't talk about finances at all. Like that was a secret thing that each person dealt with on their own. And we both seen, probably for me in 2020 a lot, where I had a client that didn't talk about finances with any of their family, and when they passed away, it was like a big surprise. Nobody knew where anything was, and we're scrambling trying to find accounts and passwords and all the stuff, and like annuities they didn't know they had. And then on the other hand, I had the client that had everything prepared. They had the conversations with their kids, and the transition of that from generation to generation was so much easier.
And it also lets people know, like
having that open dialogue.
I've said this time and time again, like if something happened to a person that I love deeply and tragically they passed away, if I already understand what is going to happen next, I'm not having to play catch up in the middle of grief.
And you're able to grieve.
Right. So that's the thing is like if something happens to my mom or my dad, if something happens to my brothers, my sister, like if something happens, I want to understand everything that they want to have happen next, because I just want to take time to grieve. I don't want to have to be stopping my grieving process to go learn about financial decisions that we could have talked about at any point in time, been made aware about at any point in time. So, with my daughter, we talk a lot about, like we one of the things that I really try to focus on with her is we don't really talk about the cost of things in dollars.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about the cost of things in time. Where, if she asks for something, if it's something small, one of the conversations, or one of the things I might say is, how much time do you need to do like family chores in order to pay for that? Like, it's not a $25 thing on Amazon. It's 2 or 3 hours worth of chores for her to be able. So is it worth 2 or 3 hours of your life in order? And I'm trying to drive that in early in simple ways. So that way, when she's older and she's thinking about the cost of things, she's not just seeing the dollar sign. She's actually thinking about how much time she has. Because that's how I feel. Like like right now, my daughter, she turns 15 in a few months. So we got to start the car buying process, and that's a big expense. And so we've been talking about some things. And one thing I want her to understand, she's not going to have to pay for that car herself, but she needs to understand she's asking me to have to work more hours. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a sacrifice of daddy-daughter time, potentially, in order for me to be able to make, this happen. How many hours is dad going to have to put in at work in order to make this possible? And so it also creates great secondary dialogue. So that way, if there is a week where I'm working, 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night every day of the week, she understands like the time cost. It's not daddy's choosing to be away. It's dad needs to be away because we're making these things for our family happen. And I want her to see that the sacrifice isn't just a dollar sign. It's our life. Like we're taking time potentially away from one another, from the things that we love, in order to take care of sometimes important things, but sometimes frivolous things. Right.
Yep.
So I think talking to your children is wildly important. I think as a parent, you need to be the leader of that. You need to be the person that comes to your children and talk about your things with your children. And even if you're an older parent and your kids are away, you can sit there, you can tell them, hey, when you come home for Thanksgiving or when you come home for Christmas, we are going to take a couple hours and I want to tell you what's going to happen over the next 10 years of my life, 20 years of my life, or if something does happen to me where I don't make it that far, this is what you can expect.
Yep.
And then open up the dialogue. Okay, what would change about how would you passing away before I do impact me? It's weird. And sometimes it's hard to talk about because we don't want, like as a parent, I don't want my daughter to have to think too much about, like, I don't want her to think that I'm coming to her with the expectation that something would happen to her before me. So at some point it's like, man, should I bring this up now? Like she's off playing, she's doing, she's living her life, she's having fun. Do we really need to take time to talk about this hard thing? That's a very likely reality. Definitely either I'm going to pass away before she does, or she's going to pass away before me. That's just truth. Right.
So some of the steps that we talked about to start this conversation, one with a spouse, you were talking about earlier,
kids.
Or kids, but with a spouse is like setting a time, once a month to sit down with them and go over everything. And then like with the family, maybe it's once a year, maybe it's Thanksgiving, November, December, when you're around family. And if something happened to, any of them, how does it impact you or somebody else in the family? And just having that expectation of, hey guys, we're going to have this talk once a month. We're going to have this talk once a year. And I think if you set the expectation early, it's kind of, again, it's expected and people are understanding that, hey, we're going to talk about our estate. We're going to talk about, our finances, and it's not going to be weird.
And I think even one step further of, planning that regular time is like put it on a calendar.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So like we can both mentally prepare. Like on Saturday, the first Saturday of every month, we're going to spend 2 hours in the morning and we're going to update. We're going to update budgets. We're going to review accounts. We're going to look at like the past month expenses, and we're just going to go through this and make sure we are on the same page. One thing that I would say is at that meeting, how do you start that meeting? How you start the meeting is important. My recommendation is to start by discussing your values individually and as a couple. So individually, I might have a value, like a human being value of, giving money to a veteran nonprofit. Where my spouse might have a value of taking care of the family. And collectively, our values are to care for one another and give what we can, right? So just review these values. And has there been, over the past month, has anything changed dramatically where our values are either new, we need to change words, we need to be more dialed in? Like I said, nonprofit for veterans, but what I really meant was I want to give to this nonprofit, right? So we can refine our own values over time. After we discuss values, then we're going to refresh our goals. So short and long-term goals. Hey, are we still working to save money for the house that we want to buy?
Right.
Are we still, is college education for our children still a top priority?
Is this vacation a top priority? Do we need to make adjustments so we can?
We said that we wanted to spend more time together, right? So like, is there evidence that we're actually spending money on,
are we like going
things,
on date nights?
Yeah. Right?
Are we doing that?
Can we find the evidence that we're putting money towards our values and towards our goals? And maybe even like if we're looking through like a bank statement or credit card statement, like I can highlight in green things that are like directly aligned. So like if a date night is important and we spent money at dinner and a movie, I can highlight those expenses to say, look, like this actually spent money
with our goals
on something we love. Right. Now, the next piece to this, after starting with values, starting with goals at a regularly scheduled time on the calendar, not just once a month, but like the first Saturday morning, whatever.
Right.
Create some rules for that discussion. Okay. One, the rule being just, it is open dialogue. We both have permission to say what we need to say.
No judgment.
That's a rule. No judgment. I always say too, like, make sure we enter into that conversation. Like, even if you have to write it down, or even if you like at the top of a page, if you guys are taking notes or reading from something, like, I am going to be full of forgiveness, grace, and I'm not going to be judgmental. Right. So if something starts to get talked about, that's like, that was like, you spent money on that. Like, nope. I'm going to forgive. That's in the past. Right.
Yep.
What we're doing here is we're not having the conversation to be super overly critical of the past. We're having the conversation about how to refine the month ahead. Right. So if there was money spent, like if I spent money and I didn't tell my spouse, and at this point I'm like, hey, you need to know I bought a gun. I bought, something for my truck, or I bought some, whatever. Right. Like, you need to know I did that. I didn't tell you. I'm sorry. I need to do better. And I'm going, like, next month, I'm not going to repeat that same mistake. Right. So creating this atmosphere where we can have these conversations, there's not judgment, it's not criticism about like holding you accountable for what you did. It's criticism in the sense that, how do we make next month better?
Yep.
Always be truthful. And one other thing I thought of when we just started talking was How I Met Your Mother. Did you ever watch that show?
No.
How I Met Your Mother, there's a couple, and when they get into arguments, they have a rule where they can call time out. And the rule is like, for the next 24 hours, they just have to have fun and like not talk about that. But in 24 more hours, they'll talk about it again. Right. So sometimes if things do start to get heated, give your guys self permission to be like, hey, time out. Let's revisit this after we go, like, have some good breakfast, or let's go on a walk and just talk about things we love and then come back.
Yep. I don't know about you, but when I'm talking to my wife and we're going through our finances and just getting updated, like when we're done with that conversation, whether it was a good month, bad month, or whatever, my anxiety levels are so low. Like they just drop after discussing everything. I feel so much better after having that conversation and knowing that we're both on the same page.
Yeah. And I think too, like part of that is, you've cleared the air.
Yep.
There's honesty, there's direction. But also hopefully if like I said, if you're going back and you're highlighting in green things you spent money on that were goals or values related.
Yeah.
And if you're highlighting in like, or underlining or circling in red, the things that were just like completely not important, frivolous spending. Yep. Like if month after month there's more green and less red.
Yep.
Like that in and of itself is like, hey, we're actually spending money on the things we're passionate about, we love, we've agreed on. And there's evidence that the process is working.
Yep.
One of the other things too, I wrote down is, don't be afraid, especially in the getting started space, to rely on like a counselor, a financial. We have couples that come in here, like they're doing premarital counseling, and then they're coming also in here to understand how to integrate their finances, and we're helping and coaching them through conversations
and having an open dialogue about it.
Mediator, counselor, financial planner. Don't be afraid to, like, if you are really bad, if you and your spouse are really, really bad about talking about finances,
find somebody like us. Find
somebody that can help you get going and master the craft, become better to where not every conversation has to end in a fight, but maybe you get to the point where 9 out of 10 of them, you guys can get through a conversation and be on the same page. One of the really cool tools about our app and our process to financial planning is our app separates, if you're not familiar with it, we look at total income. So let's say, as a couple, you make, we'll just do 100K because it's easy math. So a couple makes $100,000 a year. 15% goes to taxes. So now we're down to 85K, right? We set up goals and we set up these important things that people want to do. And let's say, another 15% is going to savings, right? So now you're down to what, 70K?
70.
Okay. And then let's say you have, like, you and your spouse have a mortgage and a couple car payments, and that's taken another, 30K away. So we have 30,000 going to debt. So now on cash flows, we have already acknowledged 15 to taxes, 15 to savings, and 30 to debt obligated payments. That leaves $40,000. Okay. So if we're going to spend $40,000 this year, we know that, let's say, 30,000 of that is on things that we have to spend. It's food, it's utilities, bills, it's the internet, the Netflix, it's the things that we know we're going to spend money on. But there's $10,000 left.
Yep.
If you work on that budgeted planning, you could say, okay, we have $10,000 that we can spend. It's guilt-free. Yep. We can do this. Now let's start with that 10K and talk about, as a couple, who gets to spend what where. So maybe you say, okay, $5,000 of this 10K is going to be spent on things we decide to spend it on. Okay. Together. So this could be the family vacation. Yep. This could be upgrading whatever, this and that. But this is money we are going to talk about, and we're going to do it for, like, this for us. Then I still have $5,000, $2,500 for you, $2,500 for me.
Spend it however you want.
That we can, so now there's no guilt or shame. Hey, I bought this new gun. I spent $700 on it, and I'm probably going to buy another one in a few months and spend another $700 on it, right? But I'm still under my $2,500 budget. That's an oversimplified example. But if you go through some financial planning, like, stuff, typically part of that is understanding your cash flows. And if you understand your cash flows, and if your goals say, hey, you can reach your goals if you save 15% of your money, and you're obligated to pay taxes and you're obligated to pay your debt, this is your spending money. This is the things that we have to spend money on. This is the discretionary spend. You get some, I get some. Now you're giving yourself freedom, guilt-free freedom to spend money where you want. And I think that can be also just a huge, like tool, a huge asset to saying, hey, like we've done well. Now my spouse can spend money on whatever he or she wants. I can spend money on whatever I want, as long as we don't cross this amount. And if I do need something that crosses this amount, we still have money we can spend. I just have to try to find a way to talk my spouse into wanting this too. It's or I just need to wait till next year.
Yep.
Right. So hopefully some of those tips, if you are doing it well, I'd love to know some of the things that you're doing. If you've found success in certain things and how you go about approaching tough financial conversations with your spouse, I'd love to understand that and hear that.
What does y'all's conversation look like?
Yeah. So, and at the end of the day, it's relatively simple. My advice is simple. If you're trying to get better at having financial conversations with the people that you love and that are close to you, keep trying. And if you aren't having those conversations, start trying and
try to normalize them.
Yeah. I mean, like and if you're that person, like I said, I told them to stop listening like 25 minutes ago. So if they've already stopped listening, they're not on here, but there are a few people out there that might just have figured out some way to be like, oh, we don't need to talk about finances ever. You do you, I'll do me. And somehow we'll end up magically happy together at the end. That's not most people though. So if you're still listening to this, hopefully this helps. We would love your feedback because we sit down with couples all the time. Some of you are saying, well, my spouse or I am the head of like the financial decision-making for our family. Like I run that boat. Couples share tasks, like he or she does finances and I do this and this. That's fine. You still have to like understand, right? Because if
some of the folks that's been married for 20 years, I want to hear from them.
I know. I want to know the success stories of people that have been in
marriage.
Yeah. So please let us know what works for you. And if you're like, well, my husband or my wife, they're in charge of the finances, I just beg the question, like what happens if something happens to them? You don't want to be in the middle of grieving and have to learn how to do everything that they were doing. Conversation's still wildly important. Interacting, being a part of it, even if they're the ones taking the lead, being a part of it, understanding the plan, all that's important. So if you haven't started talking, start trying. And if you are trying, keep trying.
We hope you learned from our conversation today. It is important to us that you know this is for educational purposes and not intended to be considered specific advice for any individual listener. If something we discussed is relevant to you and you have questions of how it might be applicable to your specific situation, please reach out to your financial professional. Of course, we are happy to have further conversations with you regarding specific questions or applications to your individual financial situation. With that, here are a few disclosures. Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Harpeth Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Hypothetical examples presented are not representative of any specific investments. Your results may vary. With that, thank you, and we look forward to having you back. Take care.